Hi, Thomas here. Welcome to DreamSpeak. Before we introduce today's guest, we want to take a minute to thank some of our listeners. A huge thank you to all of you who have made DreamSpeak possible. Thank you to our listeners in Columbus, Ohio, Cheltenham, United Kingdom, and Paris, France. Don't forget, if you'd like to be a guest on the show and receive a free dream interpretation session, email contact@dreamspeak.us and say hello. Rachel, our guest today, shares a recurring dream she's had for many years. In the dream, she realizes she has a baby neglected in a bedroom, and with a rush of panic, she dashes to the room, flings open the door, and the baby is always okay. As we search for the meaning together, Rachel bravely looks at many parts of her life: her career, her spouse, her children, and her purpose. We ultimately succeed in helping her understand this long-running dream, and Rachel realizes the meaning she thought it had is different than the meaning that the dream has been trying to communicate.
Hi, dreamers. Thank you for learning with us today on DreamSpeak. I'm Rika,
And I'm Thomas.
and this is the podcast about dreams that teaches you a complete system to help you listen to your dreams and get the guidance they're providing you every day.
Rachel is a serious student of the Enneagram, and looking at this dream through the lens of the Enneagram helps her to unlock the meaning. At the start of the episode, she offers a detailed explanation of what the Enneagram is. Welcome, Rachel. Would you just summarize what the Enneagram is?
Well, I'd say it's a spiritual path, and I use that word as someone who's had a hard time even defining what spiritual means, for change. Originally, the Sufis, they think the originators of it had to be an oral tradition, and they didn't think that you could understand it except for being taught orally. But it's really about understanding people's, not their actions, but their motivations, and how kind of what you talked about. A lot of times what we think our biggest strength is often our weakness, but it's also a part of us that we can love, but we're all kind of stuck doing the same thing over and over again. And it's not about being in a box. It's about how do you get out of the box and transform and kind of move almost in the opposite direction of whatever you're repeating over and over again. But, the Odyssey is written about the Enneagram. Odysseus, when he went to the 9 islands, they are in exact order of the 9 personality types.
Interesting.
And you see it throughout history. You see it in what Plato wrote. It's in Dante's Inferno. It's 7 of the 9. It's in the Kabbalah. It's in Sufism. It's kind of universal. A lot of what Jung wrote matches it. I mean, you see it everywhere. But it's basically there's just 9 ways of, I don't want to say of thinking, but that we're kind of stuck in 9 ways to avoid pain. And we do the same thing over and over again. It's all about avoiding pain. And I also look at it as like when you're born, you have all these roads that were built, and you're moving very slow, and you have to build new roads in your brain, but that requires digging and hard work. So it's how to do that hard work to go on a different path, because it's so easy to do the same thing over and over again.
That is a great description. I've never really heard somebody talk about it that way. That was very insightful for me.
Mm-hmm. The biggest thing about the Enneagram is you have to connect to your head, heart, and gut. And we're stuck in one, either our head, heart, and gut. And when you can bring those 3 into alliance, then that is when you're really going to do the work. And that's so hard to do. People are stuck in one of the 3. The Enneagram's all about triads, whether you're withdrawing, aggressive, or dependent, whether you're head, heart, or gut. There's tons of triads in there. So 3 is a very important number, but the head, heart, and gut is the most important part of the Enneagram. Let's dive into the dreams.
Go ahead, Rachel. Tell us about the first dream that you want to bring up.
Well, the dream that's actually been the most concerning to me is this series of baby dreams that started, I want to guess, about 5 years ago. I mean, I'm 49, and I think it started pairing with my perimenopausal phase of hormonal changes and all that. And I don't know, is it easier for me to tell you just about the dream, or I have my own ideas of why I started dreaming about that? Or should we talk about the dream first?
We like to just have a summary of the dream first, and then we can get into the interpretation of it.
Okay. So the dreams all revolve around a baby, that sometimes feels like my baby. Sometimes it feels like it could be a random baby. Sometimes the baby, I don't know the sex of the baby. Sometimes it's definitely a boy or a girl. Most of them have involved a baby, say, between anywhere from 3 to 6 months old. And I've always forgotten about the baby. And the baby's usually in a room, locked in a crib, but never crying. And all of a sudden I remember that I have a baby that's either mine or someone else's or that's in my care. And the baby, it's a lot about food and feeding the baby, and the baby hasn't eaten. And I remember that I have this baby. The baby's always okay. A lot of times it involves nursing. Sometimes I do have milk for the baby. Sometimes I have milk in one breast. Sometimes one breast has no milk. Sometimes there's no milk for the baby. But somehow the baby is always okay. And it's just like huge sense of relief. But there's a lot of detail in the middle that I probably can't remember. But they're pretty nightmarish. And I wake up in a sweat or a panic. Sometimes I go back to sleep and the baby dream continues. But I haven't had a baby dream for probably 2 years. And then I had one the other day. But the baby was a toddler. And it was definitely a male baby. And it was also, in the end, fine. This baby also was less about food, but just had been neglected. Like, I hadn't entertained the baby. The baby never had any toys. But the baby's always quiet. But it's this whole thing about, I wake up and I feel like, really like a monster. Like, who could forget about a baby? But they're pretty consistent, like having them once a week, every other month for years and years. And then this period of no baby dreams. And then they came back. But I had this one about this toddler. So the baby's, I guess, growing up and older, and was definitely a boy. So those are the dreams that I have the most consistent. I can go on about the other dreams, or if you want more information.
Why don't we talk about this dream first? So what we usually like to do is pull out the aspects and the symbols in the dream, and the aspects really are you and the babies, right? Or the toddler. That's about it. And then the other symbols would be the milk and the feeding, the nurturing of the babies, right? So do we want to see what Rachel thinks, or what your ideas were about what this meant for you?
So I have 3 children, and my husband wanted 7 children. And my first child came unexpectedly. I was relatively young, like 24, and my husband's 28. We'd only been together 8 months, and I got pregnant on the pill. And then I planned my son, but I've never actually really wanted children. I mean, in theory, I wanted children. Like, I always thought I might have them, but I've never been this kind of person who has to have children. I think I would have been content with or without them. But my husband wanted 7 kids. And I think because he's like the love of my life, like the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I knew on my second date that we were going to be marry and be together. And we moved in very quickly together. We'd already talked about marriage. But I've always felt that, like, a lot of my worth in our family dynamic is about producing children. And when things were younger, I felt like the kids were more important than I was. And I graduated college and immediately was a stay-at-home mom, and never really like developed my career or anything until when my oldest daughter was 14. I started working again and kind of doing things for myself, political work and cooking. But when menopause happened, I think I was really struggling with my identity and not being this person who can produce more babies. I mean, I've always felt like he still wants more. I mean, even I'm 49 and I maybe could have a baby, maybe not, but I still feel like he would like another baby. He almost is like the more maternal one in our relationship. Like, when the kids are sick in the middle of the night, he takes care of them. I think I'm a very good mother. There's always flaws, but his children are everything to him. And so I think there's this dynamic that I don't feel like, as a parent, he's probably the better parent. So I think just like youth and vitality and all these things like tied to aging. But my therapist thought that I was the baby, and that it's about like rebirth and this new point in my life. So we're just empty nesters as of this year. So I have a 24-year-old, a 21-year-old, and an 18-year-old. I feel like I need to produce. Like, my husband, he runs this company, he writes books, he teaches at the law school. He's one of these people who's just like so productive that. So I think some of it's just like self-worth and not feeling like I produce as much as him, and that my role in the family was to take care of these children. When the youngest was born, he was like, someone has to stay in with the kids. I mean, we both kind of agreed that not there's anything wrong with working and putting your kids in daycare, but like just wasn't what either one of us wanted. But he was happy to stay in with the kids too. So that's what I think it's about, not about me, but about, well, I guess about me, but about this. And something maybe that I didn't, like some failure as a parent. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure, but that's kind of where I am with the dream.
Okay, well, that's great background on you and how you feel about your life and raising children and your role in the family.
My therapist said I've neglected myself, but I'm actually a pretty selfish person. I'm pretty good at taking care of myself. She says that I'm the baby, and that didn't really resonate with me. Maybe she's right, and that I've neglected myself, or it's about this new rebirth, and babies are about beginnings and rebirth, and that I'm always okay, that I'm going to be okay, because like the baby's always okay. I mean, like strangely okay. Like it's bizarre. The baby should be starving. The baby should be crying. The baby was completely forgotten for 3 to 5 days. Should be dead. But the baby is always okay. I mean, it's just this relief. It's this immediate, like, oh my God, I didn't do this horrible thing to this baby.
We partially agree with your therapist. This is just a guess right now, but we will definitely agree with the part about it being a part of you. That's something that we feel is true about all message streams. And we probably won't dive too deep into this concept today, Rachel, but we don't believe that all nighttime experiences are messages for us. We think that there are other things that we might remember when we wake up, and there are ways that we help people distinguish when a dream is a message and when it is not. This is definitely a message dream.
Definitely.
Yeah. And so when you have a message dream, it does respond to symbolic interpretation. And one of the philosophical points to bear in mind, the way that we look at dreams, is that we do subscribe to the view that some other dream interpreters and psychoanalysts use, that every element of the dream is a part of yourself. Now, it's interesting because I noticed that didn't really resonate with you, but I have a theory about why that is. And so I think now if you'll just kind of like come along and help us with the remainder of the interpretation, we'll see whether we can bring this to a place where the message resonates with you more.
Okay, yeah. Let me give you one more thing. I'm a 7 on the Enneagram. I don't know if you know much about that, a social 7. But the 7, they don't want to need anybody because they don't want to feel pain. So as a child, I never cried in front of my parents. If I had a nightmare, I just dealt with it myself. I never felt like I wanted to be vulnerable. I'm talking about like 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. And I always thought it was about them, but I actually think it was more about me. I mean, my mother was very nurturing. My dad was also very nurturing, but we weren't allowed in the bedroom at night. Like there was a rule that was like the sacred thing for the parents. But I still think it was strange that I never wanted to show any vulnerability. So part of me is also that it might be about me mourning my own childhood. But even now, I cannot show any emotion around my parents. I'm super, super stoic around them. I always thought that was just me. But since I've read about 7s on the Enneagram, that's the role that we all play, as we don't want to really need anyone or be vulnerable, because then we could be disappointed and then feel pain. So that was how I remember being always.
These are really good insights. My feeling, and I feel pretty clear about this, even though we haven't hardly begun interpreting this, your self-work and your work with your therapist has already really helped you with this dream a great deal. Do you feel like you've made good headway with it?
Well, it's hard for me to think of it about me. I don't know.
Yeah.
It feels, I guess this goes more to Enneagram work. The 7 is, we're just extremely self-referencing and selfish. I'm a social 7, so I do all this political work and volunteering, and I have refugees here, but I do all that because I want everything that I want, because gluttony is my sin. And I don't mean sin in like a biblical sense, but just my issue. And I want everything, and I want to have fun all the time, and I want all these things. So I do all this good work in the world to mitigate that. But I feel like I have so much in my life. I've been given so many opportunities in my life, and I have more than I ever expected. That's hard for me to imagine that I need more. As a child, maybe, but now I'm just so grateful for all the things I have. My therapist said that she feels that the neglected baby is me. It's just hard for me. It feels kind of like it's my selfish core, like it's coming out that I need more. I don't know. It's just a hard thing that could be something that my subconscious is telling me over and over again. Or maybe just because your subconscious is telling you that doesn't mean it's what you deserve or need. But at the same time, it makes me a little bit sad. Like when I think about that child, just recently, it's really sad to me that I wasn't able to be vulnerable with my parents. But I am kind of mourning that child just recently that was all alone.
Good. That's good. Yeah, Rachel, I have no doubt that that's tied to why this dream was recurring, is maybe one way to try to help you understand it. So recurring dreams, as you could probably imagine, are because we have an issue in our waking life that is important and or remains unresolved. something we haven't satisfactorily addressed for our own well-being yet. That's why the dream message keeps coming in new forms.
Yeah, because our soul's just going to keep repeating that until we are brave enough to look at it.
No, it's true. And then I'm just kind of having this thought that the 7 also, we kind of idealize our childhood in a way, because to feel like there was something wrong with the childhood would be painful, and we don't really want to go there. So it's hard. I've always said I had 2 loving parents. What more do you want? They always told me they loved me. They were always there for me. They supported me. My father was super religious. I kind of played the paternal role in the family. I took over because my dad was kind of out to lunch with this crazy religious stuff. So I did feel like I was a grown-up during my whole childhood for everything and for everybody. Financially, things were mostly fine. And my mom also was just like this unbelievable maternal figure, almost like a doormat who did everything for us. I cannot think of a single complaint about my mother as a mother. I wasn't close to her. There was no wisdom I got from her. She was good in the sense that she did everything for you. I think I was missing this mom that was a mentor. Like there was no mentorship. I feel like I was the mentor for both of my parents. And now I still play that role. I'm the parent and I have to constantly correct them and tell them what to do. But as a social 7, when the social instinct is dominant, you kind of have a God complex, which I definitely have. So I think I know what's best for everybody. So that's part of it. But no, deep down, I don't think I've ever mourned that child, that baby that was probably alone.
Rachel, I think you're on the right track, and my intuition is telling me that I'd like to bring up a new issue and ask you a question. So what do you think of the idea that you might have had shortcomings as a mother with your children? How do you react to that possibility?
I've deep guilt about, it was very in vogue when I was having kids. Most of my friends didn't have kids till their mid to late 30s. I didn't really have a community of peers who had kids, but the sleep training where you let your kids cry it out. And I nursed all my kids till they were a year. And you started the sleep training at 3 or 4 months. They were in bed with me till 3 or 4 months. And then you do this gradual sleep training. And probably about 10 years ago, a light bulb went out, literally just out of the blue. I was just like, I can't believe you let your baby cry and did that. It was so wrong. This baby who couldn't communicate. And I've read a lot about attachment theory since then, but I didn't know anything about that. And then I went to my husband and I said, I really think we made a mistake with the sleep training. And he's like, it's one of the worst things we ever did. I was hoping he would reassure me and say, no, that was like fine. And I have deep, deep regret about that. I know I haven't been a perfect mom. No one is, but I was as dedicated as I possibly could. I'm not the most maternal person in general, especially compared to my husband. I don't think maternal has to do with gender or the role, but I'm a very fierce advocate for my kids, but I have my own life. I'm very interested in preserving my own identity, and I'm not completely absorbed with my children. Most people I know miss their kids when they're not with them. I don't really miss my kids when I'm not with them. I love them. But in general, I think there were a lot of boundaries. I mean, they weren't allowed to watch TV and they had to eat all the right foods and they had all the play dates and the helicopter parenting. Right. That's another issue, the culture. We do too much for our kids. I actually think maybe I did too many things for them. But it's it's a societal norm right now. And then the kids have that standard. It's really strange. My daughter is sometimes upset, my youngest daughter, that I don't do more for her. I'm like, you have to do this stuff yourself. You're gonna be in the real world. And she compares me to all these other moms. I'm a pretty tough parent. I think kids should be responsible, work, do chores. I think often now the parents are the slaves of the children. But the only real regret I have is that sleep training. There's other things I wish. I've done so much more work. I wish I could go backwards and be the woman I am now with all the wisdom I have from the Enneagram. And I've done this human design work. And now I understand my kids so much more, but my eyes weren't even open to that. And I was so frazzled. We are very financially stable right now, but when the kids were little, we had very little money. I had 3 kids. My husband traveled all the time. He was gone 4 to 5 days a week. I was alone. My parents weren't close. I had no community of friends. None of my friends had kids. So it was pretty isolating. So in general, besides the sleep training, I'm fairly content with most of the decisions I made as a parent. And I'm very close to all my kids. And I've addressed the sleep training thing with my kids and I've apologized to them. I was like, I really wish I hadn't done this. I really regret it. But I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. Yeah, it gets us partway to where I feel like we might need to head with this. So I hope it's very clear to you, Rachel. I would never judge your parenting no matter what it was like, but it sounds like it was outstanding and it continues to be really good. I'm a school teacher. I'm a big believer in parents fostering independence in their kids. It seems like you guys were always a great team and you're very attentive to your children's needs and the way they're responding to your parenting style. Sounds great, really top notch. But that,
I know you make mistakes. My biggest thing is you can't fix all the mistakes, but you can at least address them with your kids and talk about. Even the times I've lost my temper, I try to own my stuff, at least like after it happens, apologize and do what I can to repair. But my husband's never lost his temper with our children. I mean, he is the most controlled. It's really hard. When the kids were young, we were kind of on the same page about parenting. As they got older, I kind of had a more of authoritarian bent. He grew up with very egalitarian, like there was no hierarchy in his family, kind of hippy-dippy family. And I grew up very much where like the mom was on a pedestal and the mother was almost like this goddess and she did all this stuff for you and you really respect your mom. And so we differed there. And my son was difficult and had some issues and depression. And he really pushed back. And so the times I mostly lost my temper was with my husband when I felt like he wasn't supporting me. My son was not respectful and he wasn't saying anything to my son. But now that I know my husband's Enneagram, he should have been responding, but he's a 5. And actually, in the moment, they don't actually feel things. They have to process later and alone. So it's really hard for him to react in the moment.
I totally understand that.
But I would lose my temper because I felt like I was so alone. And is this really happening right in front of me? That my son, who was going through his own issues, which we found out later, but it was really hard. And I know so many things about my kids and him that I just didn't know then. And I wish oh my gosh, if I could go back in time, if I could have had the Enneagram when my kids were young and this human design stuff that I'm doing, it would have transformed everything, but I just didn't know.
Well, I think that's how it is. I had my first child at 24 and you don't know what you're doing. You don't have any experience in this. You don't have the wisdom. You're learning along with them. And I think that's very normal for parents, young parents especially. We don't know what we're doing. So,
no, I really didn't. And I was 24 too, exactly the same age. It was.
Mm-hmm.
So let's circle back to why we got onto this track in the first place. So this is not about your parenting per se. It's about the human experience of what it feels like to carry guilt and where guilt can sometimes originate for us. And I'm seeing a potential connection between the guilt that you continue to carry over sleep training. And I'm not saying you should get rid of it, right? Remember, our goal is to interpret a dream here. And after that, there may be some next actions that you can identify. That's always what a message dream's purpose is to give us information that can better our lives. But first, we have to know what it means. And so we're building towards that common understanding right now. And that sense of guilt over the sleep training, I'm feeling intuitively that there may be a strong parallel between that and some of the sense of how you didn't have your needs met by your parents when you were small.
Well, I really don't want to, it feels too intense. Like even talking about it right now, I can feel myself getting emotional. I'm pushing back from wanting to do that because it's almost like I feel like I don't deserve, I don't know. I just feel like I probably just avoidance of pain, but also like I can't go there for feeling sorry for myself. I just need to move on. Also 7s, we live in the future, the 7 in the Enneagram. And so going backwards is very, very hard for us. And we move through things so quickly. Past is hard. And we rewrite the past to make it sunnier than it was. Talk about wanting to mourn it, but I don't know that I'm really ready to do that or don't even know how or like what that would entail, or it's just kind of a theory. But the thought of it's like too much. And I think that too, my sisters have all these issues with my parents and they are resentful. And I feel like they're so boggled down by the minutia of keeping track of everything they did wrong, but they're the opposite. And so part of me that doesn't want to be like them. And I'm so frustrated with them. I'm like, you got to move on. You can be mad at them all you want for all this little stuff. But as far as parents go, were they perfect? No, but they were better than most parents I know. And so why live in the past? But that's why the Enneagram's helpful because my sister, they're different Enneagram numbers and they're not experiencing it the way I am. But part of me, I think, looks down on them, which I shouldn't. And that's what the Enneagram should teach me, is to have empathy because they experienced it differently than I did. But I think maybe I view it as like a weakness and I don't want to do that.
Well, the podcast that we just put out, our latest one, was a dream of mine where I had things to resolve from my past. And it's not that I had this horrible childhood. There was a lot of issues with my father, especially, but going and being willing to look at that, and it came up through a dream. So my subconscious is telling me this needs to be healed. Like, you have been suppressing this for your whole life, and it's just like a chain around my neck because it's not healed. And so I had this huge healing by being willing to look at that dream and look at the past and look at the things that were wrong with my past and the nurturing that I did not receive. So I can really relate to what you're saying. I was not nurtured by my parents. I was very independent, the oldest child. I had this huge breakthrough by looking at that, by being willing to look at that.
What was the process like of you looking at, like, what did that entail?
Well, it entailed Thomas and I analyzing the dream and figuring out what it meant. But then I just had this huge emotional like breakdown. I cried for like an hour and a half, and I never cried in front of my parents. I suppressed crying, and even to this day, I'm not a big crier. I don't like to cry in front of people. I didn't want to cry in front of Thomas, but he held that space for me so I could have that emotional release. And I'll tell you, it was so healing to allow myself to do that.
How beautiful that you have a partner that you can have these discussions. I mean, that's an amazing thing. Yeah, I wonder, I'm the oldest also. I think as the oldest, you do feel it's very different. The birth order thing, I think, is also such a fascinating thing.
I agree. And I always felt a huge sense of responsibility for myself, my siblings. There were 4 of us. And I was a big suppressor of my emotions. And that causes problems when we're not willing to be vulnerable. It's a huge vulnerability thing for me, allowing myself to be vulnerable. I don't like it at all.
No, I don't either. I don't. It's really, really hard for me. I mean, it's legit. My husband is the only person that I feel like I don't mind expressing emotion around him versus anyone else. Like my kid, no one else. I don't really. Sometimes my kids a little bit, but and a few friends, but it's very hard. But I think in some ways because I didn't have that with my family, I put too much emphasis on needing that emotional connection with him. So it's almost unfair. I mean, I think that's a big problem with like modern marriages too. It's like we want this one person to meet all of our needs when that a bigger community.
They can't meet.
No, they can't. We can't. But the way we live, we don't live communally. We live in such isolation that our partners need too many things. And that's taken me a long time to get to that point, to understand that one person cannot be everything for you.
Your dreams, because they're recurring, they're trying to show you that this needs healing, that it needs some kind of resolution. And I know you said it's hard for you to look at that, but if you're willing to look at it, that's the only way that it's going to resolve, so you can not carry that forward.
Well, it's kind of crazy. I just had this realization. I don't know why. I mean, it makes sense to me, the dream, more if it's about me and my kids, but I definitely think that there's some issues with my kids too. And I still think it's also connected with some insecurity with my husband and feeling like my value is as this producer of children. I think, like I said, I've been very fortunate and I do all this political work and cooking, but I've never like really brought any income into the house. And my husband works so hard and I'm so like grateful of that. But I think there's some me feeling like I haven't produced anything except for these kids. And I'm very proud of the political work I've done. But we live in this world where if you don't produce money, you feel inadequate in a way, or I do, that I didn't prove something in life. I went right from living with my parents to living with my roommates in college. And I've always like had someone in a way taking care of me, at least financially. And I think it's built some insecurity in me.
Well, Rachel, I think that you're right about that. And what you're doing here is you're tying elements from your waking life back to the message. And that's really important. But what you'll find over even just this conversation, but over time with your own quiet contemplation of dream messages and maybe what this one means when we get it all kind of wrapped in a bow, is that dream messages imply that we have inherent value. And it's very hard to interpret dreams. As it turns out, if a person can't really accept that human beings have worth that's inherent, like we don't have to prove ourselves, we don't have to make money to have deep and permanent value just by being who we are. And so the reason that's important here is because my theory at the moment is that this baby that has over the years grown into a toddler in your recurring dream is essentially parts of yourself that you've had to shut away and that you can't nurture, but that you basically keep in survival mode. So these are parts of yourself that have worth and value, but that within the constellation of the life that you've created for yourself and the family that you have, you feel that their value really can't be expressed. It's not part of the picture. And so you're basically left to fend for yourself. You have to care for these parts of yourself in the dark, alone, and without support from others, because having those needs is not validated by anyone.
And without expressing them either. The baby was quiet.
The baby never cries. When I go into the room or wherever the baby is always silent. I mean, no sound. And it's shocking to me. And the baby always has a peaceful look on its face, like just so serene. The relief just washes over me as soon as I get to the baby. It's like the panic and then the relief. And I mean, there are still issues with the feeding. Sometimes there's milk, sometimes there's no milk, sometimes I'm not trying to nurse. The new dream is different because it's a toddler and it's about, I didn't occupy the baby. No one ever played with the baby. It's the first dream like that. I've only had one. And it's a boy baby. And usually I don't really think I remember the sex of the baby. This was definitely a boy, but it can walk. And that's the difference. Not in a crib. And I did feel this sadness that his hands weren't occupied. Like no one ever gave this baby anything to hold on to, and the hands being empty and nothing to occupy the hands.
So, Rachel, how long ago did this toddler dream happen?
It was about a week or two ago, very recently. And I hadn't had a baby dream in a while.
And did you know that you were going to be reaching out to us at that point?
Maybe I did because we had talked about it. Huh.
Okay.
I'll have to think about it.
That happens a lot to us. It doesn't sound like we're certain about it, and that's fine. But if you did have any inkling that we were going to have the opportunity to talk, that's likely why this recurring dream resurfaced, because you knew that you had kind of an urgent emotional need to discuss this with us.
Mm-hmm.
And you subconsciously knew that you'd be able to get some more insight into this.
I think you're right.
I want to teach you a trick now, okay? This
Okay.
is one of the most powerful tricks that we've figured out over the years for interpreting dreams. When you're looking for the message of a dream, and it can be a specific symbol like an inanimate object or a place or a person, it's oftentimes even easier with a person in our dreams. The emotional energy that you feel can be very revealing. So I want to really just focus for a few minutes on the emotional energy that you felt from the baby dreams, not the toddler, but from just the babies. You remember how you said that you perceive a serenity when you enter the room and rediscover the baby?
Yes.
So we've got serenity on the one hand, and then you as the dreamer, which is what we call that aspect in the dream, the person who's kind of carrying the consciousness, your consciousness, that aspect feels a wave of relief, right?
Yes. Yes. The time period between when you realize you have the baby and you go to the room, which feels like an eternity in the dream, do you remember that there's this thing that can't take care is the work for the dream? And then every time I have the dream, I can't believe that the baby's okay, logically, because it's too long.
Right.
But the baby, always okay.
But the baby's not just okay, the baby is serene.
Yes, peaceful.
Good. Okay, so that's a big clue, and we're going to use it right now. Okay, so this is a part of you. That's the stipulation that we're working under. And you don't know the gender of the baby, so we won't talk about gender right now. We can do that when we start discussing the toddler dream in more detail. But this baby is a new and developing part of you that's important. Just like that feeling that you feel of responsibility for one of your children in waking life. You can feel that this part of yourself needs to be nurtured, it needs to live, and it deserves to thrive. It's an important part of who you are. And the serenity is a clue for you as to what part of you this might be. The thing is, we may be able to pin this down a little bit more by thinking about when these recurring dreams started, and then that period that you described as maybe a year or two of having it on a very routine basis.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit about what your lifestyle was like when it was a really routine, recurring dream for you?
Well, that was when my youngest daughter was away at boarding school, which was kind of a conflict. She's dyslexic, and we decided to send her to boarding school because she needed some extra help, and she was really unhappy there, but knew it was the best thing for her. And I must say that I had kids really early, and when she was at boarding school, I kind of felt guilty because it was like I wanted to send her to boarding school. It's just she wasn't getting her needs met, and she was this amazing school where she got to do this program in Spain. I mean, it was unbelievable, but she was very homesick. So I think, really enjoying my freedom, though. I've been a mom at that point for 22 years, that's the thing. I think I have some guilt about that. And then I was also starting this perimenopausal phase where I was realizing that I didn't want any more kids. Like, she was my IUD baby. I didn't want a third child. It was a shock, and my husband was so happy. But she and I are very bonded. Like, I had kind of trouble connecting to my other two kids immediately. There were some, not postpartum depression, but just some issues. And then with her, she and I were so bonded. Like, we were like physically like one human being. My older daughter didn't want to be held as normally when you hold a baby, you hold them like close to you, and she wanted to be held like your arms stretched out. And I just had to sing to her to comfort her. Like, physical touch wasn't comforting to her. And then my son, we were really bonded until I stopped nursing him at a year. And then he only wanted his dad, and he only wanted to be around men. Like, he wanted to be around his uncles. I mean, at a very young age. And he didn't want me to put him to sleep at night. It was like an immediate disconnection. But the youngest one, the third one, it was just so natural. We were just enveloped into each other. And it was kind of the baby that I always imagined, that bond you'd have with a kid. And I'm a very physical person, so I kind of need a lot of physical touch. So it ticked a lot of boxes for me. So she was away, and then she came back her senior year. So we live in Texas and in Maine, and I even spent the whole fall in Maine and went and visited her every weekend. And it was during COVID, and she couldn't leave her dorm room. And I would sit out in the car, and we would just talk, like screaming at each other from like 60 feet away because of COVID. And I made all these meals for her. And I mean, I tried to do all this mothering. She's the one who's always, I'm never enough as a mother, who's always comparing me to all these other mothers. My other two kids are very independent too. I mean, she's the one that's the neediest of me, which I like in a way, but then it can feel overwhelming because the standard that she has for me, I can't really meet it. But we're better now. She came back for her senior year, and I spent the whole fall in Georgia working with Warnock and Stacey Abrams. I mean, I came back and forth, and she was very, very angry with me for being gone. But I had planned this political work for years, and I'd gone to work on the runoffs. And that's been another struggle. It's like, I felt like at this point in my life, I have to do these things to define myself because I have to have some identity outside of being a mom, because for 14 years, I did nothing. Like, I was a stay-at-home mom. I volunteered at the school. I did all the stuff. And then I kind of like hit a wall, and I woke up. I was like, my whole life cannot just be about having kids. Like, I have nothing to show for it. I mean, and I opened this political club and started working, and I started really, really becoming like a very serious political activist and using my cooking and working with all these artists and putting up murals. And so, but it was also like a switch. Things are like that for me. Like, I'm in a mode, and then a switch goes off, and it's like I have to switch modes. And unfortunately, she still had me, like I was still a stay-at-home mom. She still had more attention, I'd say, than most kids, but she just wanted me there all the time. So it was the menopausal stuff starting and issues with her, you know.
Mm-hmm. And specifically, it was a phase when she had transitioned to boarding school, right?
Yes.
So it sounds like, going back to the very beginning of that, Rachel, that you were feeling some guilt because you were actually savoring the way that freed you up a little bit more.
I really did like it, and I didn't miss her as much as I thought I would.
And that makes sense as to why that would be the time that you were having this dream the most regularly. Because essentially you were having your attention repeatedly called on a subconscious dream level to the ways in which there was a very important part of you that had been neglected. And you were haltingly making attempts to meet your own needs. And so what this dream has been trying to shed light on for you, Rachel, is what this part of you actually is. That's the potential here. So what you gain from this interpretation is a better understanding of specifically what part of you this has been that has been needing you to nurture it and foster it, and that you've been struggling to actually find time in your life to do that, and the space and the context to do that.
And it's really hard with her because looking back, it really hurt her that I was gone so much her senior year. She's like, I came home to be with you and you're just gone all the time. And I kept saying to her, if I don't do this work now, I was in Georgia 2 years before that when she was in boarding school. And so I had a lot more freedom. And this was like the culmination of that other work. And I kept telling her, I can't not do this. And she's still upset with me about it. We worked through it a lot. I think that's the crux of it too. I'm glad you brought that up because like, what was the right thing to do? I'm like, she's almost 18 years old. I don't know. Like all my friends and everybody around me was telling me that it was like she was not in a mean way, but they're like, you can't be subject to this kid. I mean, she's so sweet. She's a wonderful child. And I love that she can express more than my other kids. She really talks about her needs and what she feels and that she needs me. And it's kind of like what I always wanted in a weird way too. My other kids didn't really need me. And then I have this one kid who really needs me. And I always say I wish she was the firstborn when I had all the attention and I was just the most devoted parent and I had nothing else to do. And I really loved it. I think that's the struggle. It's like, okay, there's this neglected person, but then I was neglecting my kid. And was it the right thing to do this stuff? Or should I just been with her? I mean, or balanced it out more and not been gone so much. And then I also went to Europe too during this period and was invited to all this amazing stuff that wasn't political and was just fun. And she was really angry with me for going to Europe, but I invited her to go with me, but she didn't want to go. But in general, I kind of like to do what I want to do. I mean, that's the crux of it. That's why I'm like having a hard time having any sympathy for this baby or this person that needs more. I'm like, you need less. You just do whatever you want, whenever you want it.
It sounds like you carry a lot of guilt, and I heard you say several times that you feel like you're selfish. And I think that's a big part of this is just how you view having needs for yourself, that is selfish because you have needs. And I have struggled with the same thing, so I can really relate to that. But I would suggest that you don't look at it as being selfish. You have needs and they need to be met, and it's okay to meet your needs. And yes, you're in a constellation of a family and other people, but it seems like you do take them into consideration. You're not neglecting your children or your husband, and it's okay to have needs.
Yeah, I think it's hard for me. I'm very hard on myself, but in general, I feel like I end up picking myself over. I mean, not always. It's also because my husband, he's like more of an introvert and happy to, like, his whole life revolves around family. Like, we're talking about the instincts that I've done the Enneagram, but I'm social and like community and building all that stuff. And he's sexual, which means family is most important to him. So he's so content to just stay home, do everything for his kids, spend all this time with his children. Like, that's his greatest joy. And I think it comes naturally to him, but it doesn't come as naturally for me. So it's hard because I'm always judging myself, comparing myself to him.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's not a fair comparison because we just get joy from different things. Like, I need a bigger community and a bigger world.
Yeah, you have different needs than he does.
It feels like he's more selfless than I am, but I don't know, it's just different.
Well, even if he is more selfless than you, that might not really matter in the grand scheme of what it is that you need from your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you value family so much, like you both clearly do, it can be easy to fall into a trap of saying his needs are better than my needs are. But that's not true. Like I said earlier, human life has inherent worth, and we're here to meet our needs. We're here to have a journey, and it's unique. Every person is a unique little snowflake, right? We all have a different journey to go on. And your journey is not better or worse than the one that your husband is on, but there are a lot of ways in which it seems that you framed that comparison for yourself in a negative light to make you look bad to yourself.
Well, it's hard. I really want to be a good person, but the ugly part of it is I also want everyone to think I'm a good person. All the work I do is very showy. Like, I'm going to give a speech, or I'm going to drive around Georgia with a giant neon truck. I want the world to see that I'm a good person, which I didn't realize I was doing until I did this Enneagram work. But part of it's about building community. If people can't see the work you're doing, how do you activate all the other people to get on your bandwagon and do it with you? Because I always want to work with a group. that kind of builds, the momentum that I need. So it's just difficult. I'm not that person who's going to do that anonymous work or donate anonymously. It's hard just to view it and see what your motivations are and what you are. But
let me offer another piece of how we approach dream interpretation. Another thing that getting the messages from dreams will suggest over time is that every quality that we have has something good about it and something negative about it. That everything in life basically has its good side and its bad side. And so what you're highlighting about yourself right now is a perfectly acceptable, positive tendency within yourself. And it's a need that you have for building community. And it really helps other people. That's the good side. But what you were talking about before you got onto the piece about community, about meeting your own needs, that's the part where you tend to struggle with it. Make it into a source of guilt for yourself. There's a good side to it and there's a difficulty to it. And that's kind of what this whole dream is about. Most dream messages tend to be sharing with us things that we hide in our shadow. Because in our waking life, we just really don't want to focus on those things. We want to live. We want to have that forward orientation that you've said that you have, or we want to move on and we want to grow and have new experiences. And there's nothing wrong with those things. Dream messages come to us, especially recurring ones, when there's something that's holding us back from our optimal happiness, something that's really standing in our way that needs some attention.
No, you're sure. And deep down, when you have a dream over and over again, you just can't ignore it. I mean, that's why I've thought I've got to get to the bottom of this dream. That's why the opportunity to talk to you guys was such a blessing. I was like, this is not going away, whatever this is.
So, Rachel, I want you to try something for me for a minute, okay?
Okay.
You're just going to have to sit with a feeling for a minute. This works really well for me, but I also recognize that it's taken some practice. Remember how I was talking about the serenity and how important that emotional feedback can be when you're trying to understand what something means in a dream?
Yes.
Yeah, I want you to try as best you can to immerse yourself in that feeling of serenity. So forget the feeling of relief right now, right? I want you to set that aside. You're not being the dreamer right now. You're being the baby. Okay. So I want you to just immerse yourself in that feeling of serenity. We'll just be quiet for a minute. So I'm going to give you a little time. And I just want you to see whether you can come back with some words to describe what you think that part of yourself might be. It's an intuitive process. There's no right or wrong answer. But if you know, you're going to know. You'll be like, oh, okay. That's when I feel this serenity. So just take a few seconds and see if you can surface anything.
Okay.
Has anything come to mind?
Yes, kind of like a mantra kind of started about the baby's okay, the baby's okay, the baby's okay. And then I had this idea that the baby was just okay with stillness and not moving at this frenetic pace that I always move. And the 3 days toward the end started to keep popping up in my mind, and that this idea that you could do nothing for 3 days and you would be okay. And that I'm always running after the next thing and I never stop moving. And then even the toddler's hands came to mind and they were empty, and that was actually a good thing, that they needed to not be occupied and do nothing and just sit, and then to like stop chasing everything.
I really think you just figured it out.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Why is that valuable to you, those moments in your life?
I don't think I ever have them.
Well, I want to give you a little hug here at a distance and tell you, you do occasionally have them. And we know that from this dream. Dreams are always true, and our messages never lie. You are meeting the needs of this part of yourself, but it's only happening now in fits and starts. And it's basically telling you that the more that you do foster that part of yourself, probably the happier you're going to become.
No, that was intense. Yeah, it's hard because I have so much joy in doing so much, but there's also, I'm never content. It's never enough. I always need more, want more. And then I could just sit for a while and just be happy with everything I have and not chase more and do more.
When Thomas and I got together, I was such a doer, and he really helped me to be more of a beer. It's finding that balance between doing and being. I didn't know how to be. And maybe that's challenging for you, just being. And it's okay to be. I would feel guilt about not being productive. I always had to be productive, right? And that was challenging. But I think finding the proper balance is really important for ultimately being happy.
Oh, it's true. It's hard. I think the message of the world is that you have to produce. Only certain things have values, and it's hard to see the other things and not judge yourself. So even I think for my kids, it's hard. My husband, he's got his faults, but he's just such a producer. The way he works is like a machine, but he loves working. I don't love work. So I love to do something for a while and then I just need a break. But I still feel like I've got something to prove because most of my friends, they all went to graduate school. They all had these jobs. They didn't have kids till they were older. And so it was a lot of comparing to your peer group and your husband and everyone around you. I think a lot of it about the kids is that it was almost kind of a relief, even though I didn't want to get pregnant that young and I was really upset at first. And then when I had the baby, I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do when I graduated college. And I ended up finding that I loved cooking and doing that. But that was actually the summer I was pregnant, figured out what I loved to do most. So there was a relief to it, but then it felt like kind of like a cop out. Like I had these kids and I never had to have a job and I never had to prove all this stuff. So it's complicated. I feel like we do have a lot in common. A lot of the things you're saying, I identify with. So you think the dream still could be about me, but it also is connected maybe to the kids too. I mean, it could be multiple things that isn't just about me.
Yes. First of all, one thing that I'd like you to understand today is that the meaning of our dream messages is always multi-layered. It's really quite incredible. So if you use a linguistic model to look at dream interpretation, once you have some experience with it, you realize it's basically the most brilliantly conceived and elegant language that you could ever possibly imagine. So dream symbols and people in dreams always work on multiple levels at the same time. But the other thing is, our dream messages are always about ourselves. And the reason that we've realized that is, Rachel, is because anything else would interfere with our free will. We've found as we've worked with dreams that free will is actually a philosophical part of our universe, like some people say, that we are people who are supposed to live and make choices and deal with the consequences of our actions and learn, and all of those things are real. And so because of that, our dreams can only really give us messages about things that are completely within our control. So they have to be about us and nothing but us. But the way that it is that they always interleave and interweave with our external environment, because the way that we experience the consequences of our choices and the use of our free will is in the world around us, whether that's with family, friends, community, our jobs, our recreation, whatever, we're experiencing when we're awake has an impact on us. And so our messages are always connected to our external environment, but they always only tell us about things that we can change.
I don't know if you've read much of Gurdjieff, the guy who kind of got the Enneagram from the Sufis, and I'm only kind of like dipping into him, but he talks, and my son is a philosophy major, so we get in these really in-depth conversations about free will. Gurdjieff talks about most people being asleep their whole lives, and I wasn't sure what that says. They don't have free will because they're in this rote. They're just going down this path over and over again and just repeating and repeating and repeating. And then once you kind of get out of that and do this Enneagram, connect your head, heart, and gut together, I think he calls it the fourth way, or I can't speak of it too well, but then you are more self-aware, and then you kind of develop what I think of as free will, because you have this self-awareness through dreams or could be through anything, but that a lot of people aren't really experiencing free will because they're just not doing what he calls the work. Does that apply to this? How do you feel about that?
Well, I would say that most people probably are driven just by their patterns and their habits, and that is something that is the driver of our behaviors. And when we start to develop more awareness by whatever means, by practicing meditation
or dance,
through somatic movement, there's just so many.
He did that whirling dervish.
Yeah.
And he was all about to do that crazy dancing, that whirling dervish dancing.
Sufi dancing.
But so you think if you're not doing that work, but without meditation, without really looking at your dream, whatever method, do you think people are not really exercising free will?
No, I believe that they still are exercising free will. I look at it as nobody else is making them do something. That would be if somebody else was imposing their will upon you.
So it's more like this idea that no one's making them, but they're just doing things rotely. They don't know because no one's making them, but they're just following this pattern. So their choices are kind of just as an evolution of their pattern.
It's a lack of awareness, but I still consider them to have free will.
If you think about deer and rabbits and raccoons, do they have free will, or are they just living from habituated patterns? I would say mostly it seems that they're living out of instinct and habituated patterns. But I see us as also being animals. And so we're on the same biological spectrum with them. And I feel that there's gradations to people's degree of actually using their God-given willpower. I think that we have it, but I think that we have to awaken to the reasons for respecting it and find our motivations for using it consciously. And that's sort of what helps me not always be asleep, but I still have those tendencies to just backslide and go right back to habitual living. I can see that in myself.
Oh, I think it's it's very hard. I know it's a struggle, like really, really hard. Very hard. Oh, but it's all fascinating. But the dreams, that's a whole other side of it I've never thought of like if you don't pay attention to what your mind and your body is telling you. I mean, some of the people I'm reading about now, it's interesting. They're talking about how we've been in this moment of being in our head, and that's what differentiates humans from animals, and they're more instinctual, and then we need to really have this thing in between where we connect more to our bodies. And genetically, they were talking about the Neanderthals versus the Homo sapiens, and that the Neanderthals were more instinctual based, more animal based, and the Homo sapiens that we still have that Neanderthal in us, but we need both, which also goes back to the Enneagram stuff of like connecting your head, heart, and gut, that being in your head is great. And it did allow humans to make all these advances, and that it was a wonderful evolution, but that we are missing something by not connecting to our instincts more and being more like animals.
What we haven't talked about is how you use the meaning of a dream once you've unlocked it to find some next actions for yourself. And so we want to do that.
Yeah, that's the crux of it, right? That's the point of understanding.
And thank you guys so much. This is also fascinating. My mind is just like exploding right now. So
Good. You know that you've gotten the meaning out of a dream when you have that feeling, especially if it's a long time dream or one that you never forget. We call those big dreams. So what are things that you have done in your life, either 10 years ago or now? It doesn't really matter. It may be a small daily action, or maybe something that you took a whole week and went on a trip or whatever. What are things that you've done where you know that you're feeding and nurturing that part of yourself, that quietude and that just being side of who you are?
it's really rare, but as I'm getting older, I'm trying to actually travel less, just be at home and spend more time with my head. I feel more content doing less than when I was younger, but I'm struggling a little bit. But I do feel like I don't need to do as much or prove as much, or I'm slowing. Part of it's I'm just slowing down. I don't have the capacity to be as wild and crazy. I used to be the person stay all night, drink a lot. I don't really want to drink as much. The excess that I used to really enjoy doesn't bring me as much pleasure as it used to.
Well, Rachel, the phase of your life is changing. And one of the things that I think Rika would probably also identify with is when you do get to the empty nest phase of life, sometimes the spiritual being, peaceful, serene side of us starts to want to step forward.
Oh, yeah. When I was the age you're at now, I had huge shifts in my life. And I went to massage school when I was 48, actually.
Oh, wow. So you really, how many children do you have?
Two.
You had about 24. So we're kind of on the same path.
Yeah.
So my oldest is 25 and I'm 49.
Yeah. When I was 49, my daughter was 25. and my son was 22.
Oh, we're exactly the same. And you have your oldest is a girl and your son is, we're exactly the same, except for I have one more that came after that, the youngest.
Yeah. So when my daughter started college, I actually had started a landscaping business. And then I did that for several years. And then after my son graduated, I decided I needed to work with people. I had been working with plants for a decade and I love plants, but I wanted to branch out and do healing work, which brought a lot of peace and serenity into my life. You just have to slow down. You're working with somebody, you're working with their energy field, with their body. And so everything shifted in a really big way for me. And I had more time to spend on me because I was a huge volunteer and very involved with my kids when they were in high school, and I worked, and I felt that I could spend more time on myself, and I was ready to do that. And I really slowed down, quite a bit.
And Rachel, I would highlight that everyone's needs are unique. Meeting the needs of this baby are not necessarily defined by slowing down. It's not necessarily defined by just focusing on yourself more. It's about the fact that if you can form a relationship with your dreams, you'll learn how to make course corrections and what is actually meeting the needs of that inner child and what isn't. One thing that I know is characterizing this is it's experiences that bring you that kind of serenity and peace. And time, you'll find in dreams, is immaterial. Time means something different, is what I'm trying to say. And so if you've had an experience in your life where you felt serene, even if it only lasted for 5 minutes, that was nurturing this part of you. Is anything coming to mind where you're like, oh, that was it? That was when I just felt so centered and I was just so blissfully happy just being because of whatever. It could be anything, but what creates that for you? I know it's rare. You've already voiced that.
I think I'm always happiest when I'm riding a bike and just in nature. And I'm not a person who exercises a lot or is outside, but I think when I'm truly like feel this real peace is when I'm bike riding. Especially with and I like to ride. And it's one of the few activities my husband doesn't like to. He's very like, I want to do my own thing, you do your own thing, and we like to do together. So we don't have to talk while we do it. But it's the only thing that I can think of.
That's perfect. No, that's perfect, Rachel.
Yeah.
So what we were talking about is next actions. And one thing for you to reflect on, not necessarily something you have to do, but something for you to reflect on is if you spend more time doing that, you're going to have more moments. And so, Rachel, our philosophy of how to define next steps for yourself is to always remember to be really gentle and try to think about a next step that you can take in the coming days, not some big project you have to take on, something really small. Because down the road, if you get into dream interpretation, ideally it's done maybe a couple of times a week. You can get fresh guidance from your dreams frequently. And
wow.
So you can take small steps.
Is there a way to conjure them up or remember them better? Is everyone dreaming every night, but you just don't always remember it?
We think that's probably the case, but we do have a video on YouTube because as well as doing podcasts, we also have put out several videos, sort of a beginner course. And one of the videos is, how do I remember my dreams?
And that's fantastic.
Yeah. And so that just gives you a lot of tips. What we do frequently is ask for a dream, or we might ask for something specific, or might just ask to have a dream and remember the dream in the morning. And so our video will give you some tips on how to do that and how to set intentions for your dreams. And then you can see how your progress is going. Because like Thomas said, your dreams always tell you the truth, and they tell you what's happening with you currently right now.
I don't mean to but when I've had some dreams that are just like, that can't be me. Like, it's so unsettling what I've done in the dream or what I've fantasized about or whatever. I mean, probably for another time, but I guess that's still part of you. Part of me's like, well, I'm not responsible because it's a dream. I couldn't control it. Like, it's so unsavory for whatever reason, either ethically or whatever. But I guess that's still part of you.
Well, watch Thomas's podcast on mining the unconscious if you want to get into some unsavory parts of him, because we all have those parts. They're in our subconscious. It doesn't mean that there's something the matter with us. We all have the light side and the shadow side, and dreams can really help us to bring that shadow side forward and do something about it. It shows us what we need to work on. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with us.
No, it's just that's hard to see. That's interesting, yeah. But that makes sense. Okay, I'm fascinated with these podcasts to get some insight.
There's nuance to every part of dream interpretation, and some of the things that I've done in dreams that are really dark, like killing somebody with an axe, they actually turn out to be good things. Those impulses are not what they seem at first glance. But other things that I've done in dreams actually are pretty dark parts of myself, and they're being surfaced so that I can learn how to deal with those things better in a healthier way.
Oh, it's fascinating.
So
like that's like a whole other part of and my husband says he never remembers any dreams. I'm like, that's just not possible. But I guess
it is possible. I used to go years without remembering one dream. I'd probably remember about one dream a year.
And now I remember my dreams almost daily, but at least several times a week.
And I remember my dreams less often, but maybe once a week.
Okay.
Why don't we just make sure that we really put a fine point on next actions here?
Yes,
You
yes.
were saying that you like riding your bike with your husband and you like exposure to nature.
Limited. I mean, I'm not someone who like has to be in nature, but when on a perfect, beautiful day when the wind, it like just going on a walk bores me to death. But a bike ride, I feel so peaceful and exhilarated at the same time. That part of nature is, and the ocean. Oh, the other thing, I love being in the ocean. I don't like swimming in a lake or a river. I have zero interest. Only the ocean is my happy, but with lots of waves. If the ocean is placid, I have no interest, but I like getting torn apart in a way. I like hurt, but I love the salt. I love the tumble, the energy. So like that's my other. When I'm in Maine, I try to get in the ocean. But where I live in Texas, I can't go jump in the ocean all the time. But no other water. We have a swimming pool. I never get in it. I actually don't like it at all. And I take a bath, and I do take a bath every single night. I have like a complete bath. I mean, I don't exist without a bath. I mean, that's every single night. So that's also my decompressed, very peaceful state.
So you are starting to define what these kinds of experiences are. And the more you can find the commonalities between these things and have those kind of flashes of insight, do those things for yourself on a more routine basis, it's going to really help support that part of you. And it turns out that this is actually a subconscious part of you. The fact that it's turned into a male toddler indicates that this, because of its opposite gender, this is a part of your subconscious. So it exists in a place in your mind where you're not always aware of it and the things that it's doing and the things that it needs, but it's having a profound impact on you. And it is a part of you that you're wanting to continue to foster and to help grow. This is an ongoing kind of inner relationship that could be very beneficial for you. So the more that you can do things like that, the more it's going to help that part of you grow.
No, that makes sense. I would have never gotten to that conclusion out of it, either to connect to these other things. But it's funny how few things I could think of gave me,
And I mean, again, no judgment at all. But that's a huge takeaway for you, don't you think?
I do. The whole thing. I actually, when you told me to think about that baby, I thought nothing would even pop in my head. When you asked me to take that minute or two, or to think of the peace, the serenity part of the baby's face. It's the baby's face that's so peaceful to me. And the toddler's face, the boy, he was very content.
I thought you said that there was a lot of sadness there.
In the boy, there
in you was the sadness in the dreamer.
I think the sadness was with me. I think I was projecting. His hands seemed sad to me, but his face still had that same peacefulness. Yeah. There was something about his hands that were.
You figured it out right there. It aligns perfectly with the entire recurring dream. So the transference is what's important here. That tells you so much. You're like, why isn't he busy?
Exactly.
Right? The whole lesson.
No, and it's interesting that it moved from food to activity. I just was mourning this idea that I had not occupied his hands, and that there was nothing, no one had ever given him a toy. And had never played with, had never had anything. There was this idea that no one had ever given that baby anything to do.
And that's that baby needs.
Yes, the baby. Yep. And so it was definitely a real departure, like everything, like sex, age, like what the need, then what was insufficient.
And it's a departure from what you would expect. And important dreams often do really play with our expectations.
But the feeling, that roller coaster feeling of finding the kid, that was identical. And then knowing that the kid he was okay. He was actually fine.
And so, Rachel, have you figured out where that emotional feeling of relief comes from yet? Because it's very clear based on everything that we've figured out together.
I don't know.
You know how you keep saying that it's really rare that you have these moments for yourself?
It's true. I feel like I have so much to do. I feel like I can't take them.
Right.
I haven't earned them because I haven't produced enough stuff, or I'm behind, or I procrastinated, or I've done all these other fun things. And so I don't deserve them in a way. But then sometimes I feel like I really need them.
Right, Rachel. And so another next action for you is to start to reframe your thinking, because you're thinking the fun stimulation things that are routine for you are meeting the needs of this inner part of yourself, but this dream says otherwise.
No, I think I'm chasing the wrong thing.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, Rachel. Again, keep it gentle with yourself. But this dream right now is clearly saying you are aiming at one thing and you're hitting it. But if you aim at nurturing this part of yourself instead, you'll get a lot more bang for your buck.
Well, it's interesting that you're saying this too, because I'm doing this human design work, and supposedly my creativity, I'm having these roadblocks with this book I'm working on. My creativity really has to come when I'm alone, which is something I rarely am alone. I mean, we always have people here staying with me. I have refugees living here. I have my brother-in-law living here. My kids are coming and go. I'm never alone, but my human design is all pointing toward alone time. Even the ocean is the one thing I'll kind of do alone. I have a hard time being alone, especially at night. I kind of like my days alone, but I'm supposedly supposed to spend more time alone.
I bet you anything that's a common thread of all these things you've been describing. I know you might go to the beach by yourself, but you might go on a bike ride with your husband. But you've said things through our conversation that indicate that he's almost your sole source of emotional support, or in some parts of yourselves, you're kind of merged. So it makes sense that you might be able to preserve a sense of aloneness on those bike rides, even if your husband is there.
I think I do. Even the ocean, I love to go in with somebody, but I do like to sit on the beach. I mean, it's not just going in the ocean. It's one of the few places where I can just sit and hear it. It's really an energetic pull, the water and everything about it. It feels so powerful. I think I am drawn to power, like things that are extreme.
Yeah.
And if there are huge waves, I'll just go out and look. I can't stay away from it. It's such a draw. And I'm not a big nature person.
But the power of nature does draw you. And the thing, Rachel, is feel that emotion that you were just feeling a second ago, okay? What would likely happen with your dream life is if you give yourself that occasion and that permission to go and be in that inner space that creates that powerful feeling within you, you'll have a dream right after that. And it might not even have the kid in it, but it's still going to be about the same ongoing need and how you're meeting it.
Wow. Now, this is exciting. I'm excited. I feel really light right now. Like a lot of heaviness is gone.
Good.
That's great.
So glad. Yeah. Because this really doesn't relate to feelings of guilt, which it might have seemed like it did before. There are connections that are indirect between some of the guilt that you carry and the stream message that we could draw, but they're not really material to the actual meaning of it. The important part is to realize it wasn't really about that. It was about just this part of you, if you can nurture it more, is going to help you thrive.
Yeah, getting your needs met.
That's hard. That's a hard pill for me to swallow, because I feel like I do so much for myself that I take so much. Like that's been my philosophy all life, is like I take a lot and I give a lot, but I always feel like it's imbalanced, and I'm judging myself constantly for taking more or wanting more. But I think what you're talking about is so different from the things that I've thought I want, connecting to nature and being there is not, or the kind of gluttonous part of me gets out of control. I think I do need to tamp down those other things and do this more, and then I can have more balance.
And then bring us that next dream, because you're going to have another answer about this issue that comes if you do things proactively that would help that part of yourself.
Now I'm so curious about this dream. So I would love to know, in order with your podcasts for you guys, which one you recommend to, like, the order or the sequential. Maybe they're in order already to know.
No, they are in order, but I'm going to send you a link to that one that Rika was saying. You can hear how messed up I am. It'll be really gratifying for you.
I am curious about that. That'll make me feel better. But to start getting this mess so I cannot miss the dream. I'm already worried. I'm like, okay, what happens if I have the dream and I don't have the information to how to get it? Or I guess it'll keep coming, I guess.
That's right. It will. Your soul is infinitely patient and gentle. You'll get the messages you need. They'll always be timely. And if it's a message you need to hear, but you didn't remember it that day, you're just going to dream about it again the next day, next week. It always works like that in our experience.
So when you use the word soul, what do you mean? How do you define soul?
Great question. Let me point out to you just one dimension of this. It is a term of art for us as dream interpreters. As far as we approach dream messages, you cannot do this work without some conception that we have an inner life, we have a purposeful inner life, and that it has value. Otherwise, this whole system just does not function.
Well, that's for a whole discussion. I'm really coming around to opening up to that. I had a very strange religious background, and then I pushed away from all that, and I'm slowly trying to have a crack that will open me to some connection to that. It's coming. I almost can't get away from it because it's hitting me so hard from every direction that it's like I can't escape it, even though I'm really pushing back from it because of stuff in my childhood. So it's interesting that the messages are nonstop.
That's really cool. Just remember, Gandhi wasn't religious. He worshiped the truth. That was the only thing that ever really concerned him.
But I know I'm not going to go down the ardent religious path, but I'm just trying to keep an open mind where I was not open before. But I think that was my process of healing, moving through the extreme religion I grew up with.
Yeah.
So I don't mean religion. I just mean like opening up to just different levels of consciousness, that different ways that we can, the communication that are out there.
Right. And I understand what you mean. I think I really think that I do, Rachel. It's important to put up defenses when we have toxic religion trying to get to us. Religion obviously can be a really negative, toxic thing. But that inner thing, the thing that you're saying you're trying to stay open-minded to, that is really going to be to your benefit. And you're going to have so many amazing realizations that are personal. They're unique, just like you.
Mm-hmm. We have this inner life. It's just part of us. And I wasn't aware of my inner life for a lot of years when I was raising children, or I didn't have time to think about it. I was a molecular biologist. I was a scientist. And like I said, things shifted a lot for me in my mid-30s, where I'm like, there's got to be more to life than this. And I really felt a need to be creative and open up that right side of my brain instead of just being really imbalanced and being very left-brain person. So it was a process, opening up to that, what I think of as my spirit. I might call my soul my spirit. What's that part of me that is just so much more aware of what I need and who I am than my conscious mind is.
There's definitely, there's no denying that. I mean, even the fact that we have these dreams, I mean, you can't deny that you have the dream. So something's there. It's outside of what I can totally understand. Well, thank you guys so much. What a gift that you guys have given me, and just that you do this work for people. I mean, it's huge, it's tremendous. I love the active service and people who do service. I'm so full of gratitude because I feel like I have this common value system that I really admire in people.
And we really admire your political work, and we appreciate you keeping our democracy going. Thank you.
Well, it's so important to me, but I do it for myself just to not. I mean, it's important for all of us, but it's like a compulsion. So I have no choice. Not like a choice. It's just.
Still don't. Please accept it. Thanks.
Well, it's just wonderful to be around people who are trying to make the world better for other people. However people do it, And not everyone can do it, because that's what the Enneagram has also helped me understand. A lot of people who just are in survival mode, just having to take care of themselves, and I'm trying to have more gratitude or empathy for. I'm really working on understanding their path, because I can be pretty judgmental.
Well, I think that Enneagram work is really helpful to understanding other people. You can't expect that this person, they're going to be anything other than what they are, who they are. So how do you deal with that?
I wonder down the road today, next week, if you might gain some insight into this dream message by thinking about what causes the serenity in terms of your head, heart, and gut.
Yep, I'm a head number, so I'm stuck in my head, and I need to connect more with my body and my heart. As a 7, I really suppress pain, and I don't want to connect to my heart. So that is my biggest thing to overcome. And even after all this Enneagram work, I somehow don't even know what that means, to connect, to feel in your heart. Like, I do intellectually, but I can't wrap my head around, like, for me, what it means.
I really identify with that. And all I can do is share my journey. But I remember I got very deep into spiritual practice and serious daily meditation practice when I was pretty young, like 19 or 20. And I had a big spiritual awakening, and that became a very valuable part of my life, the most valuable part of my life. It changed me for the better so many different ways. But I remember going for years, maybe between 20 and 25, and reading all these sacred texts, and they were talking about the heart dropping into your heart space, things happening in your heart, meditation practices that had to do with using your heart as part of the practice. I could not connect to that at all. I was like, what is this? Why are all these people from centuries ago obsessed with the heart? Like, this is a bunch of hooey. That's what it felt like to me. So my point is that I really empathize with that. I identify with that. And someday you're just going to have it. And I don't know, it's just a mystical thing. It just happens. It happens at our own pace. And it took me years. And there's lots of times when my heart feels very shut down. I still think that my heart is shut down more often than it's open, but it's a part of my life and my practice. And I never lose track of my heart anymore.
Wow, that gives me hope for the future. So it sounds like you're a very disciplined person, if we're doing that practice at a young age.
Some areas of my life I am, some I'm not. I was for that. I took to it immediately.
But that requires a certain level of it
required a lot of discipline.
But not, most boys at that age are not capable. That's giving me a lot of insight into you, just knowing that information.
Thomas always seems a lot older than he actually is.
Your voice is old, but your face is young.
Well, it's been a really, really pleasant chat, and I'm really glad we could help you with this first series of dreams, and we'll do another one.
Oh, great. And I feel like this piece about the dream now, and then I can, in a way, put the baby to rest.
That's wonderful.
Super.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Welcome.
It's a pleasure. Thank you all very much for joining us on DreamSpeak, and we look forward to learning with you more in another episode.
You can find this podcast on all popular streaming services. Email us a dream today at contact@dreamspeak.us. Check out our YouTube channel for a free introductory dream course. Connect with DreamSpeak for even more learning. Our socials are in the description. Our theme music was composed by me, Rika. This podcast does not constitute medical advice. If you have concerns about your well-being, talk to your doctor or a mental health professional.